Well, everyone loves to follow John Lennox. So please do manage your own expectations. It's about to happen here. Yes, as Justin says, my name is Gareth. Some of you know me. We've been around as a communications agency for 16 years. Some of you who are media might have, in the opening years, the first probably 8 years, would have received annoying emails from me sending, I'm not like Andy, sending you emails asking, would you run this story or that story? Thankfully, we now have a team and they know what they're doing. And so you're now no longer pestered by me. We also have some clients in the room, which is great to see you as well. And we are thrilled to be here today and to celebrate what CBC are doing. Just to give you a little sense of why we started Jersey Road, when Andy and I and his wife, when we started the agency, we felt that the narrative, and particularly in mainstream media, around Christianity was misrepresenting our faith. I'm being a bit careful about using the word faith now. But it was our faith. And by the way, I have no faith in the English football team. Just that was a joke. Okay. We felt like that the narrative wasn't representative of our faith, and we wanted to change that. And we wanted to change that with better stories. We wanted to change that with good news stories. We wanted to help Christians become thought leaders in issues that matter to society. We wanted to help the church and Christian organizations become world-class at saying sorry when they had abused power and when they had messed up. We also wanted to make sure they weren't a doormat when there was malicious attack and when they were not in the wrong. And we wanted to help those who had a platform to use that platform for the kingdom. And so that's why we set Jersey Road up. As I say, we've been going 16 years and we've learned a lot over that time. We have a team of about 20 who are all over the country. We work in the US, we work in the UK, and we work in Australia mainly. But the question that we wanted to ask when we were doing this research was, how are Christians and the church we belong to represented in the news media? I'm sure you've all got thoughts on this, and if you don't, then you're probably in the wrong industry. But we have been pitching these stories for 16 years, and we've had this sense that the narrative has been both narrow and stereotyped. And I don't know if you remember the APPG report that came out a few years ago, that the conclusion of that basically was that the media are illiterate when it comes to religion, and that they are presenting stereotypes of people's lived reality, rather than people's lived reality. So we wanted to try and redress the balance of this media narrative. And so we did decide to do a deep dive into what does the mainstream news media coverage of Christianity look like for a year, to see if it could give us some ideas about how we can influence that narrative and to see a better representation of what the church and what Christian organizations are doing. You might ask, in an age of AI, as we've been talking about influencers, social media, well, you might not ask this question actually, but does the traditional media actually matter anymore? The answer is yes. And not because I'm talking to you. The answer is yes, because traditional media are now seen as a primary source of valid and valuable information by the large language models, which are used to shape the information that people see online. Earned media now is one of the key channels. In some studies, it says 62%, in some studies, it says 78% of large language models are producing content through earned media. So if anything, earned media is becoming more important, not less influential. And so as a comms agency, we subscribe to an industry standard media monitoring tool, which is incredibly expensive and incredibly unpredictable. But we use, I'm sure some of you use them yourselves, and we used that to analyze 5,200 pieces of online news coverage relating to Christianity between December 23 and November 24. We wanted to consider the pieces with the most impact. So we focused on the top 100 stories each week based on the number of impressions. And then our researcher reviewed and analyzed those stories and identified what are the key themes and the sentiment that are coming out. And to show you, these are some of the top 10 themes that emerged. You can see the number one was personal faith. The second was the Catholic Church, then the Church of England, politics, leadership, public figures, culture wars, America, and lastly, abuse. The majority of stories that we saw were neutral in the way that they portrayed Christianity. Now, if any of you have ever used a media monitoring system, you'll know that sentiment is not reliable in any way, shape, or form. So what we did was actually manually look at the sentiment beyond what the monitoring tool told us, because sometimes the sentiment, it might just be a story about Trump, and it'll say it's a negative story just because Donald Trump is featured rather than because the story itself is actually negative. So we did that manually, but so 45% were neutral in the way they portrayed Christianity, with a third negative and just over 20% of the stories positive. So there is work to do to change perceptions. But we also discovered where the opportunities are for positive engagement. And here's some of the things that we found. Faith is deeply human. Christianity is deeply human, as we've just heard from Dr. Lennox, with a significant impact on people's personal lives. And that was reflected within the media articles that we review. Individuals' personal relationships with their Christian faith was the most common theme in the coverage, with nearly a third of the stories referencing the role that Christianity had played in someone's life. These stories tracked more positive than negative. 28% were positive in tone compared to 21% negative. And unsurprisingly, given the media's interest in celebrity, more than a quarter of these stories referenced the faith of celebrities or public figures. The Independent newspaper interviewed me a couple of months ago, and they wanted the story to be Tommy Robinson is the savior, is the kind of the reason that Christianity is growing in the UK. And so they said to me, do you think young men are coming back to faith because of Tommy Robinson? And I said, I think young men are coming back to faith because of Bukayo Saka. I think young men are coming back to faith because of Jeremy Doku. I think young men are coming back to faith because of Firmino. And there are footballers, there are sports people, there are personalities who are talking so confidently about their faith nowadays that we are seeing, and by the way, we are seeing young men coming back to church. We know the report wasn't right. We know that the process wasn't right, and we know that was wrong. But we're also seeing that things are changing on the ground. Let me just tell you a quick anecdote. This might take me over my time, but I'll try and get us back. So about 3 years ago, or about 4 years ago, maybe actually, we did a story, and I think Premier did definitely run it, where we did a study with comrades where we found that young people, this was 4 years ago, young people were praying more than older people. Harry Farley, who's a friend of the show, he ran it in the BBC, and he got incredibly a lot of pushback for it. And there was a lot of Christians. The most pushback we got was from Christians saying that's not happening in our patch. So this can't be right. They had the CEO of Savanta who came and, it was Savanta, not Comrades. They came, same thing. They came and said the methodology was accurate and there was no issues there. A year later, the Church of England did the exact same story. They found the exact same thing. Young people were praying more than younger people. But the thing was, people weren't seeing it on the ground. When the Quiet Revival came out, I saw a difference. The Quiet Revival was telling a story of the methodology was incorrect, but it was still telling a story of what people were experiencing on the ground. In our church in Milton Keynes, we have had a guy come last week who said, I bought a Bible, what do I do now? This is happening on a weekly basis. So there are things that the story is shifting, even though that report, the methodology wasn't right. So just to encourage you, in case you're feeling in any way disheartened, that we are seeing something shifting. But we're seeing it shifting, I think, as well, because we have seen celebrities becoming a lot more positive in their faith. Stormzy is talking about his faith. And in just such a natural way. Ray is talking about her faith in such a natural way. Now, they might drop the F-bomb every so often. You just have to go over that, I'm afraid. They're talking about Jesus is engaging with younger people. And I'm not going to drop the F-bomb at any point during this. But there has been a significant trend in celebrities being happy to speak about their faith, often talking about how it sustains them through their troubles, but often how it drives their success. Christians outside of the celebrity spotlight have also been given opportunities to share the value God brings to their lives, particularly if they've had a remarkable story to tell. For some reason, wrestling seems to have been a key theme in recent times. And I'm talking about that wrestling rather than any other wrestling that I've mentioned about. The Daily Mail covered a story about St. Peter's Church in Shipley hosting a Christian professional wrestling charity, which combines their show with worship, while the BBC and ITV featured the former wrestler Steve Horn, who was ordained as a deacon in the Diocese of Canterbury. The second piece is that the Church of England is in the spotlight. And again, this is probably unsurprising, but despite the changing face of the UK Church, media coverage predominantly focused on traditional institutions, the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, as opposed to new denominations and streams of church. The Church of England was mentioned in more than 15% of stories about Christianity, but unfortunately there wasn't much particular good news about the church. And as you can see, there are more than twice as many negative stories about the Church of England as positive ones. And this is clearly the types of stories covered. Now, this is actually a systemic issue within society, in British society, because also the new streams of church are not monitored by the official attendance figures that the government hold to. So New Frontiers or Redeemed Church of God or Vineyard, where a lot of the growth is happening, are not being part of the official figures. So this is an issue, and partly back to that religious illiteracy that we talked about earlier. The second thing on that to be said is that moral leadership is expected from the established church and heavily scrutinized. Christian leaders are regularly given a media platform because of their position as moral and spiritual leaders. And this is particularly the case for the Church of England, which isn't surprising due to its position as a state church and the presence of bishops in the House of Lords. Of the 571 stories that reference Christians in a position of leadership, 40% of those involved leaders from the Church of England. Many of the stories related to high-profile political and social issues, particularly asylum and abortion and assisted dying, while there were comment pieces from both for and against Christian motivations on all of these issues. I'm sure it won't come as a surprise as well to know that another key theme in the negative coverage around the church during 2024 was abuse. And we found just under 420 stories about Christianity and abuse during that time. Interestingly, this was significantly less than the number of stories referencing personal faith or politics, leadership, or even public figures. So whilst abuse might feel like the main media narrative around the church, it wasn't during that year. And it might not be, I don't think it will be during this year either. But perhaps the reason it feels like this is the case is because of the content of those stories, which is often devastating. Where Christian leaders do get a much easier time of it, as Christmas and Easter time, the media often want to give a good news boost around the holidays. Just this last Christmas, which was obviously 2025, we managed to secure the Salvation Army on the front page of the Daily Mirror, just talking about what the great work the Salvation Army are doing. But it was front page. It was their headline just the day before the Christmas break. The media often want to give a good news story at this point. So they invite clergy, they invite faith leaders to get involved through thought leadership pieces. And we feel that this is a huge evangelistic opportunity. You can see some of the stories up there. Stories about the church and community engagement were also much more likely to be positive. We found 390 examples of stories about churches making a difference in their communities, helping the homeless, combating poverty, giving shelter to disaster victims and more. And most of them were positive. 187 were positive and less negative. Sorry, I've gone too fast there. And as mentioned earlier, national, even regional media won't cover stories about the church doing good things unless there's something new or different about it. We all know that. We all know that as broadcasters and as media people. But when there is something different, when there's something emotive, when there's something particularly significant, the media will show up. And we are here to often tell our clients the media are not the enemy. The media are not the enemy. The media, I would say, I don't know if we're post-Christian, I don't know if we're pre-Christian, but whatever we are right now as the UK, the media are our greatest opportunity to speak to people who are outside the church. A couple of years ago, Barna did a study and they found that the UK was in the second generation of families who have never been to church. That kind of means that no matter how good your talk is on a Sunday, no matter how good your welcome, they're not there. So how do we get to them? Yeah. But that is changing. That is shifting, which is incredibly exciting. So now that we have a clearer picture about the mainstream media, what do we do about it? Each of these narratives is a reflection of the news values of the media, and they apply when making a decision to cover it. So, is it new, relevant? Is it unexpected? This is all things that you guys are thinking about all the time. Is it shocking or controversial? Does it trigger an emotional response? One of my media colleagues says that he makes a decision based on whether he thinks someone will see the story and tell their friends about it in the pub. That'll be whether or not he runs the story. You'll never guess what test. And all of these things go through a news editor's mind. I remember when we did the Eternal Wall, when the Eternal Wall first got planning permission for the land just outside of Birmingham, the Sunday Times did a double-page spread because they were like, we don't know how to categorize this. 1 million bricks with smartphones, and you can read people's prayers, and it's going to be one of the biggest landmarks in the UK. Incredible. And so they covered it, and then we had 360 pieces of coverage across the UK beyond that. As communicators, if we want to change stereotypes about the church and contribute to a more representative media portrayal, we need to know the rules of media engagement. And again, some of this will be stuff you already know. You are media, you are broadcasters, and maybe I can say this. I was on a call recently with exclusively Americans, and I used the word, I don't want to teach you to suck eggs. That's not a phrase in America. I used the phrase, and then I thought I'd frozen. So I said, have I frozen? And one guy went, no. Okay. So we went on to Wikipedia to find out the background of that phrase. So how can we do this? How can we be better at engaging with mainstream media? How can we be better at telling the story of what the church is doing? The first is to embrace the power of personal faith stories. There's interest in personal faith stories. This is not just a media thing. This is just a people thing. This is a human thing. Personal faith presents valuable opportunities for Christian organizations, for churches, and even for Christian media yourselves. We've got lots of powerful stories of redemption and emotion and surprise and even humor and quirkiness, which all adds news value. So there are many opportunities for us in this space. If we can link these stories to other news values, those opportunities are even stronger. There is an uplifting positive story. There are uplifting positive stories often in regional news, and that is a great opportunity for local churches to speak to their local media. Local media is an incredible opportunity for churches to speak to their community. So the second is being aware of the risks in public representation. Now, Jonathan Code is here if you want to have a proper conversation about he's like a bully basically, but he's a good bully. He's a nice bully.
He's also a defamation lawyer.
Yeah, I said Jonathan Code. But while media engagement often offers visibility, it also carries reputational risks. Yeah. And it's important to be aware of those, be wise and thoughtful, even when engaging with the mainstream media about stories that seem positive. So spokespeople matter. The person you're putting in front matters. Take time to prepare them. While partnering with a public figure or an influencer, be really careful about who you're partnering with. See what they've been talking about previously. How have they been positioning themselves? Be selective about the media you target too. Some publications have got a track record of negative Christian coverage, so they're not going to just suddenly start liking you just because you've got a good story. What I would say is, if you are going through a crisis, or if there is a crisis, the crisis itself is not the problem. It's how you handle the crisis. Yeah. We have seen clients who have handled crises really well, and as a result of that, have actually come out of it far better. The brand equity has gone up as a result. But you need to have a plan beforehand rather than scampering to get one once it's hit. The third is don't squander the opportunities. Whether it's delivering a Christmas message or speaking into a political or social issue, find spokespeople who can embrace the role the media has for them as moral leaders. Many of the leaders in this room and many of the leaders in your organizations have additional moral authority because they are embedded in their communities and they are supporting the most vulnerable. People care about that. People actually don't care about the fact you're Christian so long as you're doing good stuff. You know, Joe works for Christians Against Poverty. It's in their name. But the opportunities Christians Against Poverty have had in the media and more broadly with government and elsewhere, it's not a barrier, because Christians Against Poverty are doing great work.
Amen.
Churches doing valuable community work, Christian organizations doing valuable community work can proactively. I don't often get an amen during my talk about the difference they are making too. The more people that are affected by the issue, the higher the news value it has, and so you can demonstrably show the impact and the connection that with a significant need, and the media are more likely to be interested. We've actually found that the Mirror, the BBC, the Guardian are particularly interested in publishing uplifting stories of social change. So it's worth doing research to see the publications that can be a partner on that. And then help the media combat stereotypes. I think it's our job to represent the church in the UK. And what we are doing, we need to think about what are we doing to combat the stereotype that we are old, we are homophobic, we are what we're against rather than what we're for. We're predominantly white, we're irrelevant, we're dying. That's the stereotype. I get a bit frustrated with some journalists who have the title as religious and media correspondent, but all they do is talk about old buildings. The church is so much more than that. What stories are we telling? How are we putting forward our spokespeople? Do they reflect diversity? Do they reflect energy in the churches? Are we inadvertently reinforcing false narratives? The newsworthiness of new, unusual, or modern expressions of church life, like the wrestling vicar, often offers opportunities for churches to proactively capture media attention and reshape public perceptions of Christianity. And we're doing that. O'Neill's a great example of someone who's speaking into the media about something that's completely new. Music he has managed to get the official charts company now categorizing Christian music as a distinct category because of the popularity of Christian music. That's an incredible win. That's an incredible win. It's a kingdom win. Yeah. And there's so much opportunity there to do more. And let's lead with transparency and integrity. Can I just say, so we have I'm going to finish with this, so don't worry, I'm landing. In our sector, in the PR sector, the crisis piece of what we do is often known as reputation management. We were deeply uncomfortable with that label. We don't think Christian organizations should be about protecting their brand. We think they should be about building trust. Yeah. So we've changed the label to reputation governance because we feel like our reputation should be something that's stewarded, not something that's managed. But it's not for everyone. We had a client recently, or prospective client recently, a US church, who they said, we have had these allegations. And we said, well, when does the investigation start? He said, well, we weren't planning on doing one. He said, are you saying that you won't work with us unless we do an investigation? I said, that's exactly what we're saying. We didn't get any more emails back from that client. So it's not for everyone in the church, but it is how we can be an example, how we can be a light, how we can be salt to the institutions around the world. How can we be salt and light to the banking industry, to the media, to other institutions? By leading like Jesus would lead. Amen. The media has been instrumental in exposing abuse and institutional failures within the church. Yeah. Can I just say, some people have said to me that's a spiritual attack. It's God cleaning house. God wants purity in his church. Amen. There are times where it is malicious, but there are also times where that was wrong and it needed exposure. And therefore, let's not be protectionist or defensive. Instead, we should be transparent in addressing abuse, acknowledging past failings with sincerity, taking concrete action to back up public apologies, and showing a credible commitment to change. Reputation isn't built in a crisis, it's built in the ordinary, unglamorous work of the years that have gone on before. And that means we have a seat at the leadership table, asking hard questions, and sometimes being the person in the room saying, we need to think carefully about how we handle this. Mm-hmm. As a comms agency, we've helped many churches, Christian organizations respond in a crisis. More often than not, those crises could have been prevented. And that's partly because they should have been managing the risks rather than waiting for the crisis. As communicators, we all have significant opportunities to speak into the media narrative. We can lead with transparency, prioritize trust. We can develop our understanding of news values, the news cycle, so that we can best understand how to serve the media. So I want to land there. But I thank you that you are doing great work. I thank you that you're telling great stories. I thank you that you're leading with integrity. And we as a team continue to pray and support everything that you're doing and what you're doing. So thank you.